The Tyto alba is the most common owl and one of the most widespread birds in the world. In North America, they range from Mexico through the entire continental United States and into parts of southern Canada. Historically, the Tyto alba nested in naturally occurring crevices in hardwood trees and cliff faces. Today, the barn owl, as it's commonly known, has adapted to nest in old barns and other abandoned structures.
There's this book by, you know R. Gordon Wasson, the guy that discovered, I don't know if he discovered, but he kind of popularized psychedelic mushrooms.
Okay.
He was this investment banker, and his wife was this Russian woman. And basically on their honeymoon, they like went up to upstate New York, and they were like in this cabin. And they went on a walk one morning, and she found all these mushrooms on the ground, and she picked them all up and was like, these are great mushrooms for eating. And he like freaked out. He was like, you can't just fucking eat mushrooms you picked in the forest, like they're gonna be fucking poisonous, you're gonna die. And she was like, no, just fucking chill, like these mushrooms are tight. And she ate the mushrooms and she was fine. And it precipitated this conversation where they talked about mushrooms and culture. And she was saying that in Russia, I mean, everybody learns to go out and forage for mushrooms and knows what mushrooms are good to eat. And there are poisonous mushrooms, but somehow in the West, the danger of finding them has become totally out of proportion, blown out of proportion. And so he wrote this book that's like the history of humans and mushrooms. I can't remember what it's called. It's fucking like 1,500 pages long. But it separates cultures into mycophilic and mycophobic cultures. And obviously we live in an incredibly mycophobic culture where, you know, people can eat their champagne mushrooms and their button mushrooms, and every once in a while I get a little chanterelle and an oyster in the mix.
Morel.
But I mean, in basic terms, there's like this thing, even among people that are in the know about mushrooms, so you have to be really careful, you have to go out with an expert, and you have to like know all of this really technical shit. And these are the relics of the fact that we're this mycophobic culture.
Yeah.
And mycophilic cultures treat mushrooms totally differently, and probably this has something to do with people's, just this like knowledge gap with cultivating psychedelic mushrooms. Is that people just don't even conceive of their ability to grow mushrooms or conceive of mushrooms as beneficent things, even though in some other way they think they're amazing because they grab and accessed all these other different aspects of reality. There's still some sort of weird latent cultural phobia of like the mushroom as an animal kingdom.
Barn owls eat mostly small rodents like voles, rats, and mice, and typically swallow their prey whole. After swallowing their meal, digestion begins as fleshy portions are separated from the hair and bones in the glandular stomach. These fleshy portions then pass into the muscular stomach, where they are broken down and then absorbed into the intestine. The remaining hair and bones in the glandular stomach are pressed together into a slick bolus and then regurgitated. This rejected matter is called an owl pellet.
These are the ones I can hold. Sure. That's pretty nice ones. Steve's gonna be really pleased with these guys.
So, what are we looking for, Jake? Just real quick.
You know what we're looking for. Just nothing that's like, it can't be in pieces, basically.
How big?
It can be flattened, it can be basically any size, but it has to be one whole owl pellet because each owl pellet contains one mouse skeleton.
Wow, what's up with this girl?
Oh, weird. What the fuck is that? Is that a dead dog or something? You may not know me from Adam, but I'm Bob Songer.
Oh, look at this torn up flag.
Some say I'm the last hope that Klickitat County has from the drug-riddled hordes of queers and transsexuals. Did you know that marijuana is associated with negative life outcomes? Do you want negative life outcomes for your children? relatively unhappy.
4 of them back there. Pellets.
Okay, well that's not worth it.
I stroked it to Bob Singer. Sorry.
All right, boys. You drove through my town with a sheet of acid. I could fucking let you swing for this.
Or I could
But-
let you gag for this.
You make love to my wife while I tickle your ball sack. We can just forget about this whole thing. Y'all boys better get hard now. What the fuck? Well, this is the thing that, kind of the reason that I think technology is a demon. Because it's obviously reached levels of complexity at which it's kind of this runaway phenomenon that no one individual human can completely comprehend. And we're becoming more and more subservient to. It's kind of like Silicon Valley is the legions of the demon of technology. And they're creating more and more complex ways in which we are constantly plugged into media. And I guess the question is, like, what does the technology demon want? And I conceive of it as being somehow like the, have you seen Fern Gully? It's like Tim Curry from Fern Gully. You know, he's the evil smoke monster that's inside of the logging machine. There is an evil smoke monster inside of computers and like technologically complex objects. And it was not very sophisticated in the beginning of the steam engine, you know, and like people's lives were affected by technology because the shuttle loom workers were put out of work and like all this type of shit. But as far as I can tell, the extent to which we're enslaved by technology is directly related to the extent at which technology can present complex, two-dimensional, mechanically reproducible images in front of our eyes. So you have Walter Benjamin, who wrote The Work of Art in the Age of Its Mechanical Reproducibility. At least I think that's what it's called. And he's saying that when you can reproduce an image in mass, it loses kind of all of its authentic power. There is no autograph, and you can create an image and destroy the original and only have copies, and people become like awash in a sea of copies. And this kind of idea is at the root of the melange of horror experienced by postmodern writers and postmodern thinkers. And technology has just been increasing in orders of complexity of its ability to present complex two-dimensional images before our eyes, to the point where the technology demon has got a little fucking screen in all of our pockets that's just constantly showing us these images. Alright, I think that's all the spark plugs, right? 1, 5, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, cool.
Today, Barn Owl pellets are found in classrooms across North America. By dissecting pellets in science labs, students learn about the skeletal systems of small animals and the relationship between predators and prey in the wild. Barn Owl pellets are a byproduct of a healthy ecosystem and offer science curriculums an alternative to dissecting embalmed frogs. This allows students to learn anatomy and animal identification without causing the death of an animal. Each year, over 1.5 million owl pellets are dissected in the United States.
There's another 100. This bucket might have a little less than 300, but it's going to have like 300 small ones, which is a pretty high number. Look at that. Even this is like, it's like broken, and
Yeah.
this is a really soft one, so they're, you know, the perfect pellet is, you know, even that.
Yeah, that broke a little.
But that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, you know, kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah, well, I've been honing in on it a little bit, trying to bring better pellets, you know.
And yeah, there are all different. I mean, you can take it to an extreme. We've got Ruth, who will bring in 2,000 and will throw away like 4
Jesus.
because she just spends hours grooming her pellets, which I wouldn't do. I mean, that's what I get paid to do.
Yeah.
But I don't mind that she does it.
Oh, sure. Well, I guess probably she just likes to actually have a good idea how much money she's going to be making.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes the market is, you know, just flooded with owl pellets. Sometimes there are not enough pellets. Right now it seems it's slowed down a little for the summer, but it's been a good year.
Yeah. What is it right now, 75 for bigs?
Yeah. Occasionally we run into a very odd pellet, like this one, with the little
That's
dangly
great.
legs.
That was like a kangaroo mouse. Too,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Uh-oh. There he goes. Yeah.
That's fits, right?
Yeah, we can get some of that.
Here's pH increaser.
Yeah, that's what we want. Where is it? Yeah, that's what we got. Yeah, this is not what we want.
Really?
Yeah. The pressure dial gauge registers pressure in pounds per square inch. The pointer moves around the dial, indicating the pressure within the unit. Pressure being be controlled and maintained by adjusting the heat setting on your stove. Oh no, wait. Maybe it's working now. Well, there's mescaline in that cactus. The question is, can we coax it out? So there's a whole part where you deskin the cactus and process it in the blender, which we did. We pressure cook it. After the first pressure cook pull is done, let the pressure cooker cool off until it can be opened. The liquids will now be separated from the solids, so it's time to set up the straining vessel. I just used a pasta colander with, well, it says swim. Do you know swim? It stands for someone who isn't me. And it's a way that people like try and get around incriminating themselves on the internet. So it says, someone who isn't me just uses a pasta colander with some cheesecloth to put over the big holes. This straining vessel is then put over a large collection jar. Squeeze out the remaining water trapped in the cacti by pressing down with a bowl or something similar. And then it looks like we want to boil down the pulls. Yeah, so perform another 2 pressure cook pulls, strain and suspend for a total of 3 pulls. Once you have all your pulls together, reduce down to a manageable amount, say around 1,000 to 1,500 milliliters, and discard the solids. Now prepare your extraction vessel for hot liquid by running hot water through it for 2 to 3 minutes. Pour your reduced pulls into the extraction vessel and let it cool for a little while. And once cooled, it is now time to base. This is where someone who isn't me feels many people go wrong in the extraction. A nearly excessive amount of sodium hydroxide should be used. Someone who isn't me used 225 grams of lye to base in this particular extraction. One can slowly add the lye directly to the extraction vessel or dilute the lye in water first and add to the extraction vessel. Someone who isn't me prefers adding directly to avoid adding more water than is necessary to the extraction vessel. It's a fucking huge amount of lye. Now we add the solvent. We're using D-limonene. Then we'll agitate it and let it separate, and then we'll decant the solvent off the top. And then this is where it kind of branches away from a typical DMT tech, because I do a freeze precipitation on naphtha, But with this D-limonene, we have to salt it, which is you basically put through a weak acid solution of hydrochloride or hydrochloric acid, and then that somehow precipitates the crystals out, and you decant that off again, you evaporate it, and then you end up with this product here, which is mescaline with some impurities in it, some other alkaloids, and then it has you go through and do an acetone wash. And then you end up with this stuff, which is the pure white mescaline hydrochloride.
Students dissect pellets with a metal probe or toothpick. They begin by gently prying open the pellet, being sure to not break any bones. The best way to figure out what animals are in your pellet is to focus on the skulls and jaw bones. Next, they separate the fur and the bones into piles organized by size. Each pellet contains at least one full skeleton, and a very large pellet can contain as many as 7 smaller skeletons.
Try pulling more towards the, like...
These are the clutch.
The hell is that shit?
What's that?
It's chucking a bunch of liquid out now.
Oh yeah, I mean, all the rest of the fluids.
So it just works.
Better after all, dude.
Yeah, man.
Well, maybe a little pressure there. It's gonna be the most awesome durability test of a tire ever.
So, that'd be great just to collect spare tires and bring them up here.
You
Huh?
can,
You know, like the donuts?
I
Those-
usually reserve it for tires I actually find in the forest, and I can actually take out of here after I recycle them down the hill and then take them away.
Dumb bounce. Fair bounce.
Wait a minute.
That's like a long ways.
Oh my god! Yes!
Oh yes! Yes!
Yeah! A 10 out of fucking 10, huh? It hit that hip.
You leave it, Charlie. You leave it, Charlie. No.
Perfection.
No, leave it, Charlie. You leave it, hound dog.
So people would live like here?
Yeah, like that.
I assume that there just wouldn't have really been any people. Like, why would there have been people in this spot? There's like
Well, I don't think
really
they were
fucking
here, but
bare.
I think they're like wherever there was like a river coming in. I'm sure there's people chilling out. You know.
So right up by where that river was coming in, that we were
Yeah,
going
like
in?
Wishram had their own. There's an old language that was like native to the Wisham area. There's a recording of it online.
Really?
Speaking of it, yeah. You know, say what
When
you
did
will
it
about
die?
modernization, but the loss of language is pretty tragic.
Loss of language is fucked.
Pretty like unimaginable tragedy.
Yeah, one of the only art pieces I went to that documented in Greece that I found really, really moving and intense was just going into a black room and just watching a video. I guess it probably wasn't really a video. It was subtitles of just a whole bunch of different people speaking in like dying languages.
Yeah.
There were like, 10 or less people in the world that spoke them. And they're just speaking. They had like 50 of these languages, and you just like listen to these people talking in a language that's about to die. There's like a whole way of encoding a universe that's about to die.
A whole soul.
Yeah, sure, man. It's a demon that's about to die. I mean, a language is like such an incredible fucking product of human mind. For it to die out, for everybody to speak one language,
Yeah.
so fucked. What do you think about Elon Musk dating Grimes?
I don't really know, dude.
You haven't formulated an opinion?
I don't really like Grimes. I like Elon Musk more than I like Grimes.
How much do you like Elon Musk?
About as much as I like anyone I don't know.
So not a lot.
Jake?
I wonder what the Nez Perce Res is gonna be like. There's a guy, kind of a famous academic, who like worked at fucking Harvard, like really, really like cream of the crop researcher of some type. I can't remember exactly what he is now. I think it was psychology or something. But he got really interested in the alien abduction phenomenon, wrote a number of books about it, did like tons of case studies interviewing people like that.
Yeah.
And he basically became ostracized from the academic community because of his work. Because he looked into all of these cases and he said that basically whatever is happening, the traditional response was that like it's either they're making it up, it's a hallucination. A really popular one at the time that he was writing was that it would be a cover-up for like past trauma or something like that. And all of these people that he interviewed, he was like, I've interviewed tons of people with sexual trauma, all sorts of trauma in their lives. The people who have alien abduction trauma are way more fucked up, basically. Like their trauma is way more intense, and that does not make sense as a coping mechanism to develop a fantasy that's even more traumatic to cover up your real fantasy. Yeah. They came up with all this stuff, and basically his approach to people was not to proceed from the position that they were wrong. Yeah. And so this caused him to be ostracized from the academic community because they were like, it is irresponsible to like give these people any like idea that there's a possibility that like what they experienced was true, basically. But one of the things that he discovered about it that I thought was really interesting was that the vast majority of alien abductions are accompanied by a profound alteration of consciousness. Like people experience this in like a way that is like akin to tripping, which is not to say that it's not true, but that they're unable to relate their experiences in the terms of like what we perceive of as ordinary consciousness. So this thing with like a color that can't be described. Or a fundamental ineffability of the experience. Like I can't describe to you, I have to use metaphor, or like symbol in order to get across the content of my experience of an encounter with the extraterrestrial is really, really interesting to me. Because people encounter extraterrestrials all the time in altered states of consciousness if they do something like smoke DMT, or they see the machine elves and they like claim they counter autonomous intelligences and like kind of other interdimensional realms and shit like that. So there's obviously like some sort of an interplay here, whereas these people are experiencing something spontaneous that doesn't involve having like ingested something pharmacologically or like, you know, directly intervening with brain chemistry, but something is happening with them spontaneously that has consequences somehow in the physical realm that's not just like psychical but is like physical, like this shit that happened where the plants didn't grow there. Or a lot of people have kind of wounds or scars that they claim were a result of these experiences. The shit says to me that like if you're talking Occam's razor or whatever, which people love to trot out, why is the like simplest explanation that they're crazy? It's like really just the explanation that coincides with what we presuppose to be true about the situation. Yeah, it doesn't actually seem to me that it has the same level of explanatory power as these people are experiencing something that is like completely non-ordinary and is kind of transcends the ability to just be written off as crazy. And writing it off as crazy is fucking way crazier than anything they're saying about the shit, you know?
From ancient Egypt to medieval Europe and Mayan Mexico, indigenous cultures around the world depict barn owls as omens of evil. Calling them names like demon owl, death owl, or disease giver, they have been misunderstood for centuries and often killed. Today, farmers are learning to look past their nocturnal hunting habits, raspy screeches, and ghostly appearance, and appreciate the owls as a means of regulating rodent populations. Some farmers are even setting up owl boxes or large birdhouses to encourage nesting, making the owls an essential part of their farm's ecosystem.
But it goes back even so much further than that, because that's what I was just saying about the death of Ivan Ilyich, which like I was reading because I like try to psychologically process through things that I'm not dealing with on like a good root emotive level with books, you know? And I mean, obviously my dad's sick and this book is just supposed to be like, you know, one of Tolstoy's masterpieces, and the whole linchpin of this is like this guy Ivan Ilyich is this like extremely just like decent and pleasant fellow who like has a nice job and he works really hard at his job, and he has this wife who he like originally likes, and they have this pleasant and like just like all around good life, and he like thinks he's in love with her, but then she just becomes weirdly peevish and shrewish, and so he's like, oh well, I guess like, you know, my wife doesn't make me happy. He just doubles down on his work and plays a lot of cards with his friends, but he does everything that like he's expected to by kind of bourgeois 19th century Russian society, and is just super successful, and everybody really likes him, and like he thinks he's doing everything right, and he's like happy in this kind of like disinterested way. And then when he's dying, he realizes it was all just this incredibly like hollow sham, and he can't confront the fact that he's about to die because he lived inauthentically. And the counterpoint to this is this weird peasant boy who's caring for him is the only person who he's not like enraged at seeing, because everybody else he feels like is kind of just confronting him with their health and their vibration and their liveliness, and just like making him feel that much more sick and alone, and he resents them because he knows that they resent him for being like mean-spirited and malingering on and just like being sick all the time and just like kind of waiting for him to die. But this peasant is like just really like good-natured and full of like nice, you know, joy of life kind of. Yeah, so he just realizes his entire life was a fucking weird hollow sham. And like, if everything tells me this, then like, because I keep getting that impulse to just go and grasp straws at some sort of thing that will make me money, so like at least instead of just treading water and trying to figure out what I do with the possibility of never having done anything, I could have at least lived like a kind of a, like that type of a life, you know? Instead of leading no life at all.
Say this when it comes to loot walls, because if the Lakers lose tonight to a 10-win Bulls team, this will be losses at home to the Knicks and the Cavaliers and the Bulls, all in the span of the last 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks. LeBron, being healthy or not, there's no difference making on what's going to happen with loot walls. Yeah, is LeBron going to be in a suit tonight? Is he going to be there? I think the better LeBron dresses, the closer.
the basic idea of the psychedelic hiking guide is based on my belief that people have a kind of a weird, fucked up relationship with going out and experiencing nature, where everybody gets like done up in fucking like little Nike duds and Patagonia sweaters and goes for a little walk, and it's like they're moving through nature, but there's no like meaningful interface with the actual landscape or with the biome itself and like the living capacity of the landscape or the capacity of the landscape to inspire wonder. And there's none of this like awe or this shit that the German romantics were really into, like talking about how beauty is terror we're still just able to bear and stuff like that. I think that like there needs to be like more of this component in like man's relationship to nature, where it's one of this kind of like awestruck, overwhelming beauty and terror, like when somebody sees an angel in the Bible and they like almost fucking explode, you know? And part of it also is like a deconstruction of just like the hiking guide thing, because basically it's gonna be, I have like a series of 14 hikes that I like taking throughout Forest Park that I have like mapped out on little maps. And they're great hikes, so somebody could use it as an actual hiking guide. But then I'll have these extended like note sections that are just like go off on these just insane kind of like philosophical meanderings, talking about like all sorts of just different weird shit that I've learned obsessively reading about shit on Wikipedia. Like some of it just totally fragmented and disjointed. I have a section I've written up on different famous paintings of parricides, like fathers killing their sons. There's like Saturn devouring his child by Goya. And then there's Ivan the Terrible killing his son, which is by this intense Russian romantic painter. And there's other art stuff like the psychedelic paintings of this guy, Richard Dadd, who did the Fairyfeller's Master Stroke, or Louis Wayne, and these were both like mentally ill Victorian guys that were like schizophrenic and did these just totally tripped out fucking psychedelic paintings. Just going on like weird kind of like meanderings through all of these different diatribes. The whole thing is like framed in this concept of the heirloom, which I don't know if you've read this famous essay on psychoanalysis that was like pre-Freud, this famous psychoanalyst named Victor something, I can't really remember his name. He wrote this essay called On the Origin of the Influencing Machine in Schizophrenia, in which he like talks about this common delusion in schizophrenics that there's some sort of a technological apparatus that's just outside of the scope of their comprehension that is controlling their reality and the way they interface with reality, and that machine is in turn controlled by some sort of like sinister, secretive people, and that everything's kind of a conspiracy against them, basically. And this is really famously kind of exemplified in The Combine in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You know, there's like this crazy machine that the chief doesn't understand, or whoever's the protagonist doesn't understand, but is persecuting him, and like there's all these fucking people in charge of it. But one of the earliest examples of this is this guy James Tilley Matthew or something, who was this London tea broker in the 1600s, and he was like famous, and he made all this fucking money, and he was like a really influential member of the merchant class, and then he became schizophrenic, and he basically thought that there was this thing called the heirloom, which was like this weird pneumatic device that they were using to like weave his entire reality around him and all of his perceptions, this sinister cabal of pneumatic chemists. And he has all these like crazy drawings of it, of like the heirloom, this like fucking projecting all these images out and shit like that. And basically, the heirloom for me is this like framing narrative of modern technology, where it's like we have all these devices that are like projecting these two-dimensional images at us that are deceiving our senses, and are like we're interfacing with reality through all of these different prisms of meaning. And these is all the heirloom, dude. I mean, like, it's a technological apparatus that's slightly outside of the scope of my ability to comprehend it, and it's controlled by sinister fucking pneumatic chemists like Zuck the Cuck, fucking Jeff Bezos, you know, and they're controlling our reality. Yeah, they're totally just controlling everything about the way that we process information and the way like we interact with our physical environment in these subconscious ways that we don't understand and they don't really understand. That's all just about like making that sweet fucking moolah, dude.
Ciao.
Singing my cattle call. Cattle were prowling, the coyotes were cowling, down in my prairie home. Singing these cattle
call. Well, he rides in the sun till his day's work is done. He rounds up his cattle each fall. He's singing his cattle call. 4 hours he will ride the range far and wide, while the night winds blow up a squall. His heart is a feather in all kinds of weather. He sings his cattle call. He's brown as a berry from riding the prairie, and he speaks with an old western drawl. He's singing his cattle call.
A normal brood contains between 4 and 8 owls and rely on a near constant supply of prey from their parents for nourishment. Only 1 young in 3 manage to live to its first breeding attempt, with the larger owls in a brood often eating its smaller siblings for survival. During periods of declining food supply, male owls often explore beyond their native range, looking for new feeding territories and potential mates.
That was actually where we inaugurated our like acid, sex, and steak rituals.
Steak?
Yeah.
Huh.
That's a critical component, dude. Every time we do that, we have, well, there's like,
Afterward?
yeah, or just somewhere like in the middle.
You eat steak in the middle? Like tripping on acid?
Yeah. Oh, dude, steak on acid is amazing.
I usually don't have much of an appetite when I trip on acid.
I like don't either, but if you have sex for 6 hours and then you just like grill up a really nice steak. I guess that is one time I will say that is like, it's not like the sex and the steak, like, they're definitely very separate activities, but it's like that level of like sensory enjoyment.
Yeah.
Like everything about acid for me is about sensual indulgence. It's like fucking crazy music, sex, delicious fucking, I always get like really nice ribeyes that I would normally like never spend money on, you know? Like rub them with salt and like marinate them in oil with crushed garlic for a while beforehand. Boys, we've tapped into a vein over here. Are you reading me? Can you confirm receipt of transmission? Over.
You hear that? Dude, there are so many fucking pellets up here, it is insane.
There's that many?
There are so, I think I'm gonna fill up my bag.
See if we can come in with some extra bags, I guess. You think that you're gonna want some?
Possibly. I mean, if you want to come up here and join me, there's a ton and we can keep going.
Look at that right there.
Looky here.
Look here, mister. I look for pellets for a living.
Lucky, lucky.
It's not a good living, but it's an honest living.
All right, let's transfer. So I just throw them on.
gentle.
Gentle, baby.
Yeah.
Pellet dust.
That's fucking most of a homer right there, dude.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I perpetually plagued my dad with a series of what he called "Hey Dads," which is,
Hey, Dad.
"Hey Dad, how does X or why does Y?" You know. I wonder if my kid will do that. He seemed to have an answer for literally everything, and like looking back, I don't know if he just like made half the shit up, or if he just knew everything, or if I was just asking really stupid questions. Or for some reason, did I tell you about the time that I spent an entire Blazer game planning a really elaborate armored car heist? My dad got really annoyed with me.
Really?
Yeah. I was like 8 or 9. And I was like, no, what if it was like, oh, yeah, you know?
You weren't even watching the game.
Pretty much. I did shit like that all the time, you know?
Well, how would you feel if your son was obsessed with sports?
I don't know, live and let live.
What if it's all what's all he cared about?
I don't know. Aren't we always in unconscious rebellion against our parents, and that's why fucking kids who have really weird alt parents end up fucking just being normies? Kids who have normie parents end up being freaks?
I don't know, a lot of kids with normie parents are just, I mean, they're freaks in their own way, but that's what
Yeah,
everybody is. By that logic, then most of our generation should be, I don't know, I guess there are a lot of weirdos that became normal.
My kids are gonna be straight edge, dude. For sure.
Get the tattoo when they're babies.
Yeah.
It's straight edge, that's so funny.
It's like literally one of the most outrageous ideologies.
It's just some crazy suburban shit.
Yeah. If you look like, put your head like this and look backwards, it looks like the sky is flat.
The sky is flat, right? What do you mean?
Well, I guess I don't really know. I kind of thought it was domed.
Maybe. The image is two-dimensional. I feel like if you take ketamine, you kind of can figure that out, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, shit's just two-dimensional, and I'm like a speck in between two flat pieces of paper.
I don't know if I'd call that figuring it out. Dude, fucking ketamine does, like, you can't really remember it when you come back, but it's like some of the stuff it shows you about space and time, you're like, oh yeah, of course. And you come back and you're like, whoa, what the fuck just happened to me?
I don't know, I accept it pretty well at this point. It all makes sense to me.
No, I mean, everything makes perfect sense to me when I'm there. How does the fire department get stuck getting cats out of trees? Is it just because they have ladders? pragmatic.
The world's a wacky ass place. You don't have to even take drugs to see it necessarily. Just like getting out, whatever.
Yeah, but it's amazing how it, like, if you aren't looking at things the right way, it can all seem so banal. Like, a place that's so insane and so full of such crazy mystery and, or not even mystery, even the stuff that's known is fucking insane, you know? But the ability of something like that to just, I don't know, kind of wear thin and become boring is really depressing. I've been there too. That's what they call growing up, I guess, and then I've been trying to recapture that. It's like, I mean, I might have told you this. I was listening to this podcast, and this guy was talking about how he was a soccer coach for, like, you know, a little league team, and how, in one sense, it was really frustrating to try and teach these kids soccer because they would not fucking pay attention. It was also really inspiring because he was saying that in soccer practice that day, some kid had, you know, was dribbling the ball and then suddenly stopped and, like, turned around and just exited the soccer game and said, "Look, a fly!" And it was just like, originally he was like really annoyed because he was like, "You're fucking playing soccer right now." But that's the type of relationship of wonder and awe that a child has, where you see a fly and you're like, "That's fucking nuts! Like, what the fuck," you know? And that's what it should be like, but everything just kind of loses a little bit of its... Whoa, fuck, that's a big ol' honkin' moon.
I don't know nothing about birthing babies.
And it's on the move, dude, it's booking it.
And once again, ladies and gentlemen, the moon is on the move. And we'll be here at WKPN 95 giving you a play-by-play.
Currently, barn owl populations are holding steady throughout North America, but their place in the modern world is tenuous. The decrease of farm and pasture land and the continuous sprawl from large cities jeopardizes the habitat and way of life of this majestic, ethereal bird.
La camicia? La camicia. Shoe, la scarpa.
La scarpa.
Hat, il capello.
Il cappello.
Il capello.
Il cappello.
Il capello. La scarpa.
La scarpa.
La camicia.
La camicia.
La giacca.
La giacca.
No, non la giacca, la scarpa. What's that? You smell that?
Madamina. Il catalogo de questo. La ma bella mio. La la. This would go straight towards reading librettos for me.
Huh?
Librettos from the opera.
Yeah. You want to learn to read them?
Well, I have a whole bunch of like translations with like the vocal score so that you can like follow and read along.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. But I think that they take a lot of liberties. I would like to learn the Italian.
Yeah. Well, are they don't make the translation rhyme or anything like that?
No, I mean, they don't always rhyme when it's an opera anyway, but they space it out note to note. So I think they're just trying to convey the general meaning of the song, and they use a lot of like English idioms and stuff. Yeah. And they're pretty old translations, so I think that they are not considered to. There's not even really an attempt to make them accurate.
Yeah.
They're just supposed to convey the spirit and meaning of the song.
Yeah.
But that one's tight. This one from fucking Don Giovanni, where his like butler's showing this lady this list of women he's had sex with, and he's like, from Spain 1,000, from Italy 800, from all these different places. From España. Something so. I wish I remembered the. I said 1,000. 1003. 1003. 1003.
Cada vita, il catalogo è questo, delle belle che amo il padron mio, un catalogo che io fatt'io. Osservate, leggete con me, osservate, leggete con me. In Italia 640, in Lavagna 231, 100 in Francia, Turchia 91, ma in Spagna son già 1.300. 1.300. Ma tra queste contadine, cameriere cittadine, ma contesse baronesse, marchesane, principesse, per d'ogni grado, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età. In Italia 640, in Lavagna 231, 100 in Francia e Turchia 91, ma in Spagna son 1.300. 1.300. Ma per queste contadine, cameriere, cittadine, ma contesse, baronesse, marchesane, principesse, e ma donne d'ogni grado, d'ogni forma, d'ogni età, d'ogni forma e d'ogni età, d'ogni forma e d'ogni età. Nella bionda, bella l'usanza di lodar la gentilezza nella bruna, la costanza nella bianca, la dolcezza vuol di perno la grossolta vuol stare